we are ready for our 12th stitch, the weaving stitch. Sometimes it's also called the woven stitch, but we'll stick with weaving stitch. Here it is. If you're familiar with weaving in general, you can see why it gets its name. It's just threads going one direction and then woven with threads going in the other direction. Here's another example. It's really effective when you work it in more than one color, and also when you work it in multiple colors, so you can create patterns. If you've ever seen a kilt, you'll know what I mean. So we'll move straight to the sampler this time. No going through this first, because it's just as easy to just show it on the L in the letter or in the alphabet. So we're going to start with the stitches that go vertically, so this way. You can do it either from the bottom or to the top, or from the top to the bottom. I'm going to start at the bottom, so I'm starting the bottom left corner here, and then I can see that my drawing is a little bit wonky, so I'm just, instead of just relying on that, I'm going to lay my thread across and then sort of squint at it so that I know it's more or less straight. Alright, so this is where I'm going to insert my needle. So let's see if that turned out to be straight. Yeah, I think that's okay. Now I'm going to come up a couple of threads away from where I inserted my needle, and then I'm going to come across and insert it again, a couple of threads from the previous stitch, and then again come up a couple of threads away. Try and keep these stitches here and at the top aligned. You don't want them to sort of stick out and then align and then they're sticking out. You want an even line both top and bottom. As you can start to see, there's a little bit of a gap in between each stitch, which is fine. It actually makes it easier to do the second pass of the stitch if there is a little bit of room in between. So let's fill this up and we'll try the next one. As I mentioned, it's better to keep, or it's best to keep this line the same. And if, like I haven't drawn it very evenly, use the grid of the fabric so that here is a row in between the threads of the fabric, and I'm following that. So I'm inserting and coming out on the same row in the fabric. Try to line this last stitch here up with the line on the letter as best you can. It doesn't have to be perfect, it's fine if it's not exactly, but try and get it in approximately the right spot. Right, so now I'm ready to start on the short section. So again, I'm going to lay my thread across, so now this is my, actually I think I'm going to undo it. It looks a little bit uneven. So again, I keep the same pattern with a couple of threads in between each stitch. The amount of threads you want to keep in between each stitch of course depends on how fine your fabric is, but if you aim to have approximately the same space in between the stitches as the thickness of your thread, that's a good sort of rule of thumb. And don't worry if they're not all the same. Once you do the next step, it will all come together. Right, so now that I'm at the last stitch, again, try and make that line up with the end of the letter here. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to be approximate. Okay, so now I have filled in all my vertical stitches or my warp stitches. That does not have anything to do with Star Trek. Right, so let me just get this needle and thread out the way, and then we'll move on to the weft stitches. So you can work either left to right or right to left. I think I usually start by working right to left. So I'm going to come up from the back with my next color. Just one thread, I think it is. Outside the last stitch I made in the bottom right corner. So I'm going to come up. When you have a long area like this is, you may want to use a longer needle. I'm just going to carry on using this one because it is possible to do it. It is possible to do it with just your regular needle. You just have to do it a little bit at a time. So I pass my needle over the first stitch, under the next one, over the next one, and under, and carry on like that. And you're only going over and under the stitches on the surface. You're not taking your needle underneath. Right, so here, because my needle is not super long for this, I'm just going to do it a few at a time. And be careful when you're doing this that you don't catch the previous stitches with your needle, because it's very easy to do. What you can do is turn the needle so that the eye goes first. That does make it a little bit easier. Like that. Right, so you want to push the thread down. I'm just using the eye of my needle to gently push it down. No need to force it, because as you add more stitching, it will help to push it down. So now, the end here, I'm going to insert the needle again, just the thread outside the bottom left corner here. And I'm going to pull it straight or tight. And then I'm going to come up again, a couple of threads away from where I inserted the needle. And it's a lot easier if you turn the work so that because you'll be working with your dominant hand. So in my case, that's my left hand, so that I'm working from right to left. Right, so because I started with passing over the last stitch in the previous turn, now I'm going to start with passing my needle under, and then over, and then under, and so on. And as I work through, I'm using my needle again just to push down the previous stitch. So we go over and under. And always double check if you think maybe you have got the over, under, over wrong. And just check it, because it is actually surprisingly easy to skip one or do one too many. So 2 overs and 1 under instead of 1 over and 1 under. Right, so I'm back at the other end, so I can turn it around. And again, before I put my needle down, just going to use the eye to push the thread down. And this is also a good time to check, did I skip one? No, it looks okay. So I'm going to pull the thread tight and insert it a couple of threads from where I came up the previous pass. And then I come back up a couple of threads away. And then I'm ready to go the other way. So now I finished with an under on the previous pass, so I'm going to start again with an over. And again, using my needle to press down the previous stitches. In this example here I'm using 3 strands because it'll make the individual stitches stand out more, but it works just as well just with 2 strands, or you could try with 4 strands and see what that looks like. Right, so I'll push my thread down, pull the thread tight, and then insert the needle next to the previous one. Come back up, and because I finished with an over, I'm going to start with an under. Don't worry if these long stitches seem really loose. Unless they really are loose, it's fine. Once you do the weaving, it will all be secured on the fabric. Right, so now I'm just gonna carry on. I might add a different color, I haven't decided yet. At any point you could change the color, you could have changed the warp stitches as well. In this example here you can see that I changed the colors. And I did that as well here. You can see that a bit better because they stand out more with the blue against the warm colors. But it's a really fun stitch to try out some weaving. And this is also a good stitch to know if you want to do some darning at some point. So have fun with the weaving stitch. The tutorial you have just watched is part of a series of 31 stitch tutorials that I have made to go along with the pattern for this embroidery stitch sampler. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. If you want to check out the pattern, you can find the link in the description. And whatever you're making, happy stitching!